All right, Bailey, when it comes to big swim baits or when it comes to any lure, really in general, I feel like there's kind of a moment where you really kind of understand it or where it really clicks for you. And so I kind of want to start off this podcast really talking about maybe what that moment was for you with a bigger bait, a bigger swim bait.
Yeah, honestly, my entry into the big bait game was one that I still absolutely love to this day, and that is one I don't even consider a big bait anymore, but it's the 6-inch mag draft, and I feel like that's a lot of people's route into we'll call it the gateway drug into the big bait game. And that was one where a guy that I had fished with that kind of it was the first time I ever been on a bass boat. He showed me that, like, got me into some like nighter tournaments stuff back in high school, and he showed me the 6-inch mag draft and actually gave me one to go try out my own to back when I was in a paddle kayak, and he gave it to me, and I'm like, man, this thing's huge. Like, I ain't gonna catch nothing on this. And I was that guy thinking like, are you going shark fishing with these things? And I finally took it out and tried it, dude. And it was like within 10 casts, I caught a 5.5 pounder on it. And I'm like, oh my God. And that's like, from there, just kind of like I threw it every single time I went, spent all of my money that I made in my summer jobs on tackle, but mostly mag drafts and bigger swim baits, and started diving down that rabbit hole. And it took a while to get to like the big expensive glide bait game, but that was kind of like my eye opener to like, okay, these fish will eat bigger baits. They want a bigger meal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the funny thing is that like my experience is almost identical. Like 6-inch mag draft was kind of the thing. I think for me, really, it was when there was a Bassmaster Classic, maybe when Zaldane, I don't know how many years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where he used it, and I'm like, man, I have just got to start picking that bait up. Like, have to do it. And it was exact same thing. Fished it in a pond, caught not a 5.5, caught a 2-pounder, and I was like, okay, 2-pounders will eat this thing. Which for an Ohio guy, that's kind of an important thing. And then I just started like replacing it with my baits. Like there were certain baits that I would always throw. Like I would throw a shallow crankbait or spinnerbait in this situation. I just started throwing that mag draft instead, and the number of bites that I got was pretty much equal to what I had before. But I realized that I would catch that one big one or 2 big ones or even 5 at times throughout the course of a day. So it's interesting. I think that, like you said, that is the gateway. Like that is a great gateway type swim bait. And it's funny how when you start moving out into like other swim baits, how you look back at the 6-inch mag draft and you're like, man, this actually kind of looks small now. You know what I mean?
You're looking at it like, this is kind of tiny actually. When you pick up the 8 too, you're like, that's a 2-inch difference, like from a numerical standpoint. But you look at it, you're like, this is way bigger than the 6-inch. Yeah. There's no way they eat this. And then a 2-pounder tries to choke the 8-inch, and you're like, okay, this kind of has a whole new perspective.
Yeah. Now since you brought up the 8-inch, I actually have the 8-inch sitting right here. What is your experience with the little bit bigger? Because like you said, it only, if you look at the package, it's 6 inches versus 8 inches. But I've always said that this is probably double the amount of plastic of a 6-inch. Like it's a much larger bait. So what's your experience with the 8-inch bin?
So I throw that a decent amount. It's more of, I throw a lot fun fishing off the get, but like in a tournament scenario, like I'll start with the 6 and kind of, cause that's just, to me, like, honestly, I feel like at this rate, the 6-inch mag drafts kind of almost become more of a confidence bait than a wacky rig or even a finesse bait, like in order just to get bites. And so if I know when, say in a tournament scenario where it's kind of that time where I have a good limit, but I just need that one kicker fish, that's when I pull out the 8-inch. Not that it can't give me a limit, but like, my ratio of, not running into smaller fish, but having a bigger fish look at that as an easy meal. That's kind of where I pull out the 8-inch, and I've caught a pile of fish on it. It's definitely one that is, I feel like it's still underused, to be honest, either underused or it's very under talked about, one of the two.
Yep.
And it's one that has a lot of freaking drawing power too.
Yeah. I talked to Oliver Nye about big baits several months ago, and he said that he's seen a lot of times out there on the water where a traditional, like the baits that we're talking about, like a 6-inch style soft plastic swim bait, actually won't yield as many bites. Like there are certain situations as some of the bigger ones because of like you said, there's a drawing power there, and the fish are just a little bit more interested in it. And it could be for the fact that like there are a lot of guys throwing the 6-inch these days. But I thought that was really interesting. I've heard that before from other swim bait guys too, where like sometimes the big baits will actually get you more bites, which maybe doesn't make sense mentally, at least in our bass fishing heads. But I know that for me, it was somewhat intimidating throwing the 8-inch, just because again, I live in a part of the country where like a 4-pounder is a giant. Like, you know,
Yeah.
and I felt like that bait was too big for a lot of our fish. And I actually decided to just lock it in my hand one day. And I actually videoed this. It's over on the Bass Fishing HQ channel, but I just locked an 8-inch in my hand on a pretty, you know, a pressured body of water, but a body of water where there's a lot of fish. And I ended up getting, I think, like 8 or 9 bites over the course of the day. I landed probably 6 or 7 fish. And a lot of those fish were like 1.75 to 2.5 pounders. You know, they weren't giants. Now I did catch one pushing 4 and a couple of other good ones, but I know that for me, the intimidation factor of these baits can kind of be a big deal. And so that's another question that I had for you is actually like, I feel like there are a lot of anglers who are intimidated by the big baits. And so like, what would you say to those guys who maybe have just been intimidated to throw one?
Yeah, I think part of the intimidation factor might be, especially like when you look at the 6-inch, you can go and throw that on your jig rod. Like you can go throw that on something. Like obviously there's a perfect setup for it, but like you can get by with a jig setup just fine. The 8-inch, it kind of enters that realm where you might kind of need something a little bit more specialized to handle the weight, and to be able to cast it well. And obviously, from a reel standpoint, like you can make do, but there's ways to be a lot more efficient. And I think that's why some people get a little bit more intimidated, is one from the setup standpoint, but also they look at the bait. And when you talk about the 8-inch mag, it's not really a money thing. I think when you talk about the big glide baits, that's where some of the intimidation is, from being able to spend 50, 70, 100, 300, however crazy you want to go on those baits. I think that's like, whoa, that's a lot for one bait. I can get a year's worth of soft plastics for that money.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think there's that. And what we've already talked about, where it's like, there's no way they're going to eat that. You know, it's more of like, is it actually worth my time to go throw that? And I think what you just talked about, forcing yourself to lock it in your hands, that helps you get over that hurdle in my mind. Where it's, once you are, we did a recent panel podcast on Serious Angler where Polinick said, when you catch your first 2-pounder on a big bait, all worry about big baits or your doubts go away. Because that really shows you that the little ones will eat it, so the big ones are definitely gonna eat it.
Yeah.
So I think the intimidation is understandable, especially if you've never thrown anything over that 6, 7, 8-inch mark. But once you finally force yourself to do it, you just have to go basically the words of Shia LaBeouf, you need to just do it. Like, just go throw it, dude. Again, it'll open your eyes to things, because even the 8-inch, you might not get a lot of bites. That is an incredible search bait. Like, especially say if you're practicing or just looking for fish, the amount of tension it gets from like small little, male bass that are cracked out will go and headbutt it because they can't eat it. Like, it gets a lot of attention and show you where fish really are. And that's, there's other ways to look at it, but I feel like it's one of those things where you just have to throw it. Just tie it on. Even if you don't have the greatest setup for it, that's fine. As long as you got strong enough line to get it somewhere out there, you'll start seeing the power of them.
Yeah. Now, speaking of that, you mentioned equipment, you mentioned line a few times. Since we're kind of on the subject, when it comes to like the 6-inch bait, which we kind of agree is like the perfect, like, get into swim bait, bigger swim bait deal. What's kind of your equipment, rod, reel, line for that? And then also, what do you like to use for, we'll say just like the 8-inch mag draft, like the bigger one? We'll get into glide baits here in a little bit, because I think that's completely different. But as far as those two baits, what's your rod, reel, line configuration?
Yeah, so up here in the north, I like to go for the 6-inch mag. My setup stays pretty standard, but I'll go like a 7.6 heavy. That's usually what I'll go with, a 7.6 heavy. 17-pound fluorocarbon, and I almost always, unless I'm fun fishing and don't really care too much about land ratio, I swap out the treble hook almost every single time, and I put in a quad. And
Mm.
I got that from Justin Lucas. I saw him doing that, I think about 2 years ago or a year ago. And so I've been doing that for probably a season and a half. And the quad has made a big difference because you have three, points sticking out of that bait versus just two. But before I would go beef up to a larger treble hook and a much more stouter treble hook. Being with the heavy, I'm able to kind of lean on them a little bit harder. But it's nothing crazy real wise, just like that 7-1, 7-2, 7-3 gear ratio. Cause it's one where you have a lot of fish, especially the bigger ones will come up behind it, swallow it and swim with it. You need to be able to catch them, but it's also not too fast where you're, especially with a mag, the mag specializes in that slow wobble. And so you need to obviously not be able to blow that bait out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty standard setup. If I go down south, some bigger fish around or some more timber, I'll bump up to like 20-pound fluorocarbon. But if I do that, then I put a nail weight in the bait so that it's a little bit more centered and it has more wag in the tail.
Mm.
Well, then when we talk about the 8-inch, that's where I go up to like a 7-9 heavy, or basically kind of like a standard entry glide bait rod. Like a Dobbins Fury 795 is a great one. That's one I've been using for the 8-inch for a few years now. These are Shimano Tranks 200, 20-pound fluorocarbon, and that usually will get the job done just fine for you.
Yeah. Perfect. Now, there isn't a ton of companies that make the quad hooks. I think maybe just two that I'm thinking of. What's the quad that you use?
The Ryugi.
The Ryugi, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. I actually have used that same one on like a flutter spoon, just as the bottom hook, and I kind of like that too, just for the same thing, especially when it comes to spoon fishing, like they swat at it. And so having those 4 points opposed to the 3 points, I feel like is a big deal at times for hooking up. So
yeah, and it's fairly strong in regards to not bending out on fish. But one thing I do like, where I used to use like a fairly large hook for the 6-inch mag, like a 2-aught like Owner ST36, like a fairly decent sized hook. And every time I would try to bend that third treble out farther so that I could stick it up into the bait, because as you know with mag drafts, that little magnet lasts maybe a fish. So you usually take that. I saw Zaldane made this tip years ago where you bend out that third treble, stick it up into the fish so that you have kind of those 2 gaff hooks sticking out of there. Well, a lot of times the owners would snap when I was trying to do that. The quads are kind of nice in the fact that it takes a little bit of muscle to bend them, but they don't break when you do bend them. And so they kind of stay in there, which is pretty nice. And you have 3 trebles sticking out versus 2.
Yeah. That's pretty smart. I have stopped that particular tip you were talking about, Zaldane, how he kind of bends out the one treble, sticks it up there. I actually stopped doing that after I fished a tournament on Douglas Lake down in Tennessee. Or sorry, not Douglas. What's the one next to Douglas that's very popular they always go to? Gosh, I can't think of it. Cherokee. I fished a tournament down there on Cherokee, and I got on a mag draft bite, skipping it underneath docks and just around wood laydowns. And I lost 2 fish that particular tournament that I'm almost positive I skipped it under a dock and it actually fell out, and then they got hooked with that hook that straightened out already. So it's something that it's a good tip. I think once your bait starts to get wore out, there's just the chance of it actually coming out on the skip. And at the time I was extremely broke. So I was getting every fish that I could out of these baits. And so anyways, that's something that I've kind of stopped doing. I'm not saying it's a bad tip. I'm just saying that's kind of been my experience with it. So
yeah, it happens all the time, like miss fish after you're skipping that bait. And it's the bait is great because it skips like a rock. Like you can skip it so deep under overhanging trees or docks. But yeah, it is very frustrating though. Like when you miss a bite under there and you're like, how the heck did it miss it? And you look back and your trebles free swinging, obviously those fish probably missed that bait completely.
Yeah.
At least the hook completely. One tip that I got to figure out a little bit better is somebody showed me that you can take kind of like the safety pins and pin the shank of your treble hook into the bait, and then just like bring like a pack with you because you'll lose them. They do that and they put that into the bait, and that like kind of like how the call shad has that little snap in there.
Yeah.
that I don't really like that either because it doesn't last very long, at least in my experience. So you just take kind of those safety pins, just buy like 100 pack for $2 on Amazon, and you just shove them into your bait, and they're wide enough where it'll hold the shank of your treble against the plastic, so that when you do skip, it'll last through there. But chances are you're going to lose it if you get bit or catch a fish.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice little tip in itself. Now, we obviously talked about the 6-inch a lot, and that's such a good bait to get started on. Since then, though, since you've really been throwing, baits a lot more, is there a different brand that maybe you lean on a little bit more now, or do you still see yourself resorting to the mag draft? Also, when it comes to glide baits, it's a totally different realm in itself, but like, what would you say is like that entry level glide bait that maybe you've used?
Glide bait wise, and that's the nice part, I think, now for us as consumers, is the industry has created a brand new whole line of entry glides. And what I mean by entry is like affordable, between that 40, 60, say 70 kind of max entry mark, which for a lot of people, $70 is still a lot, but I'd say my entry glide was the Spro KGB Chad collab. That in my mind is the best entry glide because it's pretty durable. Like you can beat the crap out of it. It's like $50, I think, still, and actually works fairly decent for a $50 glide.
Yeah.
But in regards to other brands that I might use outside of, say, the 6-inch mag, I actually throw a lot of like freestyle, just the Kitex, like the fat swing impact of that bigger 6+ inch size. I'll do that, but then manually make a line through.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when would you pick that, say the 6-inch Kitech versus the mag? Is there a reason there? Is it just a preference? Is it a color thing? When do you decide to pick which one?
Typically when I want to fish it deeper or fish it faster. To me, the mag is great. And I know obviously you can fish the freestyle mag deeper on a jig head, things like that. I just find for about the same cost, I can get 4 to 5 Kitechs versus 2 freestyle mag drafts.
Yeah.
And if you have enough super glue, those Kitechs will last a lot longer anyways. The bigger ones do. But for me, like the mag, especially the harnessed style mags, they very rarely do I go and I just like bomb flats and things like that with them. It's a lot of fishing targeted structure. It's a lot of around docks, shallow, around cypress trees, around overhanging trees on a bank, whatever it may be. It's not one where I'm just going to be bombing flats or fishing a ledge type of deal, where that's where the Kitech comes in, where I'm going to take that, especially the bigger one, because not many brands make that paddle tail swim bait in that quantity over 6 inches. And so that's where I'll throw that one. But I've also been dabbling with the dangerous swim bait as well. That one's pretty good too. But it's another one where it's like decent stock hook, but definitely could be better.
Yeah.
Definitely swap that one out.
Yeah. I pretty much don't trust any hook on a bait that comes out of the package. Like almost every single bait.
I think the only two that, obviously there's some JDMs that probably come with like decoys or Ryugis or Ichikawas, which are always much appreciated as the consumer. And I think that's why some people don't realize why certain baits are probably cost a little bit more, especially on the hard bait style, is because they come with Ichikawas or something like that.
Yeah.
But like Rapala and Berkeley stock trebles are great nowadays too, and typically are more affordable baits. But yeah, I like that. The dangerous swim bait though, I do like the I'm trying to remember what they coin it as, but it's like a deep runner or something like that. It's one of their heavier weighted ones. That is a great one. From at least a fishability standpoint. I still gotta tamper with it though. I think there's some modifications that could be made to fish it better. But last year caught my biggest ever largemouth in New York on that. So that was cool. But
yeah, how big?
It was 7.5 pounds.
Jeez. Northern 7.5 pounder.
Northern 7.5 on the dot. Had Rudd with me, and it was a giant.
Is that Cayuga?
It was. Yeah, that was our 32-pound bag that day.
Holy cow! Oh, was that with Rudd?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh my gosh, dude, that is freaking awesome. That's a giant. People don't realize, I think, how big a 7.5 pounder is in the north. Like, I almost equate it to like a 14 pounder in Texas. You know, like maybe even bigger. Like, that's a giant.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so my personal best is 8 pounds on the dot out of fork, and that was only a 1/4 inch longer than that 7.5 pounder.
Jeez.
Just shows you how much of a freaking it's a bowling ball of fins, dude. That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you live up north. Like, there is something I just love about those northern largies that, especially in the New Yorks, the Michigans, where that water stays a little bit cooler. And it's just like they got those small mouths, but they are always, it seems like year round, they are built like a freaking brick. I mean, I love it. I love every second of it.
Give them 2-3 weeks after the immediate spawn, and they're going to put all that weight back on.
Yeah. Yeah. That is crazy. So, but I do want to talk a little bit about one thing, and this is a question that I don't know if there's a perfect answer. I don't know that you can always go by this, but, you know, a lot of times we get out to the body of water, and you might have, you know, a 6-inch, kind of like we've been talking about, a mag draft style swim bait, or you might have a 6, 7, 8-inch, you know, glide bait tied up. But in your mind, is there a situation where you like one of these baits over the other? Is there a certain condition on the water, or is there just like, is it just complete preference? What would you say?
I think I go toward, for me, it's still hard to pick up the glide in the tournament unless it's like I'm throwing the Hail Mary, going for the giant at the, you know, that one kicker bite. It's still scary. I think everybody could say that for the most part, of like trying to catch one on the glide and land it on the glide.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously that soft style paddle tail swim bait is, your land ratio is much higher, or you feel more confident, I guess, in landing it than on a glide. But I feel like with that too, I'm able to get it in places where I can't get the glide bait, if that makes sense. In regards to skipping that, or if I want to fish faster down the bank, things like that, then I'll go towards a mag or a Kitech. But the glide is one where, for me, that's it. I feel like it gets a lot more attention. You might not be getting as many bites, but especially here in the north, when we have a lot of clear water, in my opinion, you just get a lot more attention. You get a lot more fish coming to check it out, especially a lot more bigger fish that are coming to check it out, because they probably don't see them as often, especially with the action, especially like a chopping style glide especially does. So it's one where I'll pick it up on tournament day when I need the one kicker fish left in the day, and I just have a feeling like the glide could do it. But otherwise, it's one where if I'm fun fishing, it's more just pure out of enjoyment, watching 2-pounders slap at it, and just being a kid in a candy shop watching giants come and check it out, and then losing my mind when they don't eat it.
Yeah.
So it's still, there's still a lot of fine tuning I have left to do with when do I pick up one or the other. And I know there's much more to be done on the glide bait side, and I feel like there's a lot more people showing ways to be more consistent with glides in places we never thought we could. Like, for example, like Milliken showing how you can fish a glide deep, and especially obviously using forward facing, but and showing how you can use that in places that nobody really thought we could use glide baits before, or they'd be as effective.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, it's another thing I'm going to use where I'll probably fish that over some flats, maybe some shallower that drops to deep water access. That's a great place to fish either uphill or downhill with a glide. But I'm also going to go and use it around some targeted structure. Maybe not like trying to skip it under docks, because it's not as effective. But it's still one that it's the attention on it, dude. Like we talk about drawing power. I feel like that's your 7-inch glide. I feel like is twice the amount of drawing power as a 8-inch mag.
Yeah. No, that's that is absolutely true. And I talk about this all the time, and you even mentioned it, you know, using these baits as search baits earlier. But I'll never forget this was back in, I think, 2017-ish or 18-ish. You know, I was fishing a open down on Norman, which is a dock lake, you know, like, and a lot of people catch fish off docks. And one of my buddies, I happened to do really well in that tournament, but one of my other buddies was also doing well. And so we kind of shared information, and I wasn't really on a dock deal, but he was. And I'm like, dude, how do you separate like the good docks from the bad docks here? And he's like, glide bait. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Like, you're catching them on a glide? He's like, nope, I'm just finding them on a glide. So he would like literally just go down the docks, throw a big glide. He wasn't not interested in catching fish on the glide, and it would draw those fish out of the dock. And Norman's a clear body of water. I mean, you can see 7-8 foot. So you could literally see there's a 3.5, there's a 4.5, there's a 2.5. And he said he just simply went around, marked all these fish, and then he'd come back half hour to an hour later with a different bait. He happened to be using a little fluke style bait, but he said he could have probably done the same thing with a wacky rig, and he would just skip it under that dock, hoping to catch that one fish. And so I was blown away by that when he told me that, and I'm like, gosh, that makes so much sense. And then I remember a tournament personally. There's actually been a few now, but this one just a number of years ago, I was kind of using the glide bait with conjunction with forward-facing sonar, and I was drawing fish off of big stumps. And these fish would not hit the glide bait, but I could see them coming off of the stump. And like you eventually got to be able to tell, like, okay, these are some big fish on these stumps. And I would go back to those same stumps with a big worm about an hour later, same type of deal, just in a different situation, and be able to catch those fish. And it was like you said, the drawing power is unreal with a glide bait. How far they can bring those fish. I remember a gentleman telling me like that he would go into some of these small canals and small creek arms and literally throw right down the dead center of them. And he said it would just draw all the fish that were on each side of the creek right there to it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. But it was like, it just makes sense as a bait to find fish. Like there's nothing that even comes close.
Yeah, and I feel like I've found some cases where you hear some guys talk about, when you talk about bed fishing, you hear about guys that they'll try to go and they're like, I want to go get that fish. I've heard a guy call it, I want to go get that fish in the danger zone so that when I do come back, she's ready to eat. And like, so you're kind of like pissing them off more, getting them in a feeding mood, if that makes sense. Obviously, a bedded bass is not going to be in a feeding mood, but like you're talking about that stump deal where I feel like almost that glide kind of gets their brain moving towards, at least gets their interest moving. When you do come back and you feed them a bait, then they're like, it's no question, like they're going to eat. Where it's funny, so you bring up Norman. I had a tournament on Norman 2 years ago, and that was exactly how I was catching my fish. Was in practice anyway, I'd go down the docks with a glide, and I just find that I'd mark the docks that all had fish on it, and I went back the next day, tournament day, with a call shad and caught them all.
Wow. Yeah. It's so powerful, especially when you are a tournament angler, but even if you're not, like if you just want to go out and figure out what couple of docks maybe hold big fish, like it's just so good. And it's not a dock thing. I did the same thing on actually Douglas with laydowns. Like I could go up to some of these laydowns, throw that over them, and you'd see them come out. And then I end up throwing a shaky head down into the laydown to catch the fish. So it's such a powerful tool, and I think that there's a lot of guys that know about it, but there's a lot of guys that know about it but don't do it. You know, like there's a big thing in bass fishing about being intentional about things, and that's one thing I think is really important to be intentional about. Now, I did want to ask you a couple more questions real quick with this, and we're going to kind of move on to a new subject, but when it comes to the glide bait realm, what would you say is like one of your biggest tips? Or sorry, big swim baits in general. Like what is one of your biggest tips? We may have already discussed it, but what is one of your biggest tips that you would give to the anglers out there when it comes to these type of baits?
I think, especially for people that are getting into it, is time and patience, but also I'd say hand in hand that with, you might hear us talking about something, you might hear Zaldane talking about something, you might hear Milliken talking about how he fishes big baits. Take all of that as a grain of salt of like maybe how it's cadence or how they approach it. Don't take it as law. Go and be creative and be experimental in how you fish them in your bodies of water. Where it's, if you really want to learn more about the big baits, it's do what Ty was saying earlier, where you need to lock it in your hand for not just one day, but pick multiple different days, a variety of conditions, and be patient with it. Put it in different scenarios, and don't just fish it one way. You know, like you can try the whole just straight reeling slowly, try the chopping style, try it like almost like a jerkbait cadence, mix it up a little bit, and then let the fish give you the feedback and take that as pulling from resources that do know what they're talking about, like Ty and Milliken and folks like that, and then start making your own judgments on that. And I think if you can do that, then that's where you see some of these guys get pretty scary with the big bait.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. And kind of to go off that too, what would you say is like the best time of the year to pick up these? Like if you are truly getting into like big bait fishing, what would you say is probably one of the best times of the year to pick it up? Because I think that there are times where you're going to pick it up and you're just going to be knocking your head against the wall. Maybe that's conditional wise time of the year, but what would you say is probably one of the best times of the year to go throw a big bait?
Well, for my northern folk, it's not right now because our lakes are iced over. But
Can skip
all
the
jokes
mile,
aside, yeah. At least for me, in talking about the north, I guess in general, talking about the whole country, throw it in your heavy pre-spawn when it is like considered. You know, I heard people joke about it, call it the KVD season, things like that. When fishing is quote unquote easier, when fish are snapping and getting ready to move up to spawn, they're moving up shallow. That is typically when you're gonna be running into most fish, especially some bigger fish. And I feel like that is where you can get that in front of more fish that are willing to eat. And so I'd use that opportunity to get confidence with it. And that's where you can start dialing in setup. You can start dialing in certain baits you like, start dialing in the small little hardware aspects of it, like your hooks and split rings, things like that. So like for me, like April and May are dumb up here, as you know. And so that's typically like, if I'm curious about a bait and I just want to like start getting bites on it, that's when I go and throw it just because I know I'm going to get bit. Yeah. And so it's more of, that's when I can go and kind of tinker with things and get confidence in something where then when there's certain windows when it might be advantageous to throw it, I feel more comfortable now that I have some experience with it. I've caught fish with it. I've been able to tinker with it if I need to. And now I have confidence to go and use it in a different environment, different time of year.
Yeah, that's perfect. There's obviously a ton of situations outside the pre-spawn that it would work. I think they get to be more conditional, but in that heavy pre-spawn time frame, like they're just more likely to bite. Their fish are, like you said, they're just snappy during that time of the year. And recently, I've had some really good late fall bites, and now I've kind of come to the conclusion that if the water temp is in the 50s, throw a big bait. Like if it is 50 degrees to 59, 60 degrees, throw a big bait. Because in the spring, that's like pre-spawn time. In the fall, that's like you still have a ton of shallow water fish. And that is like, if you just want a cheat code, I feel like if it's in the 50s, just throw it. Just throw it.
Yeah. The fall is an incredible time to throw it. It's just, I feel like fall, you have to be a little more calculated on where you're throwing. I feel like the fall is a lot harder to find the fish than the pre-spawn where they're just everywhere as long as the water's warm trending.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for us too, like as soon as our water starts falling temperature wise, it doesn't matter what you're throwing. You just go throw what you want because like they're going to feed until the ice gets here.
Yeah.
Like a buddy of mine, Ian, that fishes here in the Finger Lakes, he was catching them on a glide bait in 39-degree water.
Oh gosh, that is cold.
And they were like choking it.
Really?
And so, and I think it's just because they're like, okay, winter's coming. Just eat it, Will.
Yeah. Well, now I'm interested. Did you ask him about his cadence in that type of water? Like I caught some glide bait fish this year in probably the coldest water I'd caught them, which was about 47, 48. And I thought that was cold, but 39 is like, I mean, that's almost freezing.
Yeah, he wasn't fishing slow. Like he was basically getting their attention first. And then he's just like, yeah, it was chop, 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 chop. And then they just smoked it. Yeah.
That is
crazy. He's
crazy.
like, they wouldn't eat the jerk bait. That was the weirdest thing. They wouldn't eat the jerk bait. They'd eat the glide.
That's amazing. That's actually like some juice right there. I feel like because
he's probably going to listen to this and kill me, but
yeah, he absolutely will.
Yeah,
absolutely will. Now, anyways, kind of a nice transition. We talked a little bit about the pre-spawn there, and that's really kind of where I want to go with the second kind of portion of this podcast. I really want to talk specifically about the pre-spawn. So we can open it up to a lot of different baits, but the pre-spawn to me is kind of a magical time of the year. Like you said, April and May, when those fish are starting to push up shallow for you, it is just stupid, as you said. And so the first thing I kind of want to start with is like, for anglers that are maybe new or anglers that don't understand, or just in general, how do you define the pre-spawn? What is the difference between, late winter and the pre-spawn in your opinion?
I feel like when you start getting those, well, one, water temperature obviously is a big factor. But I feel like when you start getting into those 60-degree afternoons and like those 34-degree mornings, that's when you have that combined with like, once the water gets over, in my eyes, once the water gets over like that 46, 48 degrees, at least for me, that's when it's kind of like more like pre-spawn, because a lot of those fish for me have moved up pretty shallow, relatively shallow, like at least shallower than 8 foot and closer to the bank, because our spawn kind of ramps up pretty fast from this pre-spawn. Like once things start getting hot, they get hot quick, just with how our water works. But I don't really change too much of how I fish, to be quite honest, once it's ice out till the spawn, because those fish are going to eat most of anything you put in front of their face. But the pre-spawn to me is, that 48 degrees to 60 degrees, once basically 48 to the spawn, that's pre-spawn. That's, you can start feeling it with when you see those nighttime temps start to rise a little bit, if that makes sense. Yeah. Past that 40 degrees.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I would kind of define it. Now, I have heard people talk about this, and I think that there's, again, I don't think that there's like a perfect explanation, or I don't think everything is the same on every lake. But when it comes to like water temperature, how much does water temperature actually matter compared to things like length of the day and weather trends? Or how do you kind of mesh all those, like really those three things together?
For me, water temperature doesn't matter too much. Obviously, there's like, if it's 34-degree water, it's not going to be easy to catch them. Not saying they can't be caught, but usually for me, like water temperature wise, once we get above 42, that's where it's kind of like game on, go throw whatever the heck you want. That's where it kind of like start speed cranking, things like that, doing the things I don't really get to do too much the rest of the year with how much vegetation we get. So it's, length of day definitely matters, I think, more when we get closer to the spawn. I think once you start getting more length in the day, that's where windows start becoming more of a factor, where you might have some more lulls mixed in, where the shorter of the days, it feels like the bite's on all day long, if that makes any sense. So at least that's for me. But again, like I feel like it's hard to talk about my experience up here in the north, because we live in the land of dumb fish, and where it's like they have a little bit more brain cells down south, where I feel like windows are crucial year round. It feels like down there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like it's kind of a mixture of things, but water temp for us, you can catch them regardless as long as the ice is out, you can catch them. It's just past 42 from a bite, quantity standpoint, that's when you're going to start seeing more fish kind of being really a lot more aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's just so simple, going from dragging a football jig to throwing a crankbait.
Yeah.
It's just switching up how you approach it.
Yeah. I think kind of what you said there too is like, at times the water temp doesn't necessarily change the fish as far as their position, where they're located, but it may change what they react to the best, what lures they respond to the best. And I know that for me, that has been the case a lot, because I know that, for example, there was a couple of years ago where we experienced a very cold spring, and most times of the year in early April, these fish are like in full go, like really shallow and moving up. A lot of times the water temp is getting close to where they are going to spawn. And we had this like really cold like spring, where I remember going to the water or going to the lake. It was like the second week of April, and the water temp was 46 degrees, which is not, for where I live, is not typical.
That's
And
crazy.
I remember thinking like, man, like these, and I kept fishing. What I did is I kept fishing traditional wintering areas because I kind of thought we were right on the edge there. And what I actually ended up figuring out finally was that the fish had actually moved up and were very shallow. A lot of these fish were shallow. The thing was is that those shallow fish weren't responding to a lot of the baits that I had caught them on when they were closer to the spawn. I had to throw like a Ned rig and drag it really slow. And that was the way that these fish were eating it. And it was super interesting to me because it was a time of the year where these fish should be really pushing up the spawn. I could only catch them though on like more colder water techniques, I feel like. And then last year even I saw on a lake where we had some warmer weather where the water temp probably got close to 50, and then we had a cold front come through, but we had a moon come in, and we saw smallmouth that were bedding in like 45-degree water. And that was when it really, like, I'm like, dang, like water temperature does matter a little bit, but it also doesn't at times when these fish really get fixated on the spawn and whatnot. So I just thought it was just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Completely agreed on from a spawn standpoint, length of day and the moon phase. One thing I noticed too is if you have that element, I've noticed it a couple of years ago where I might have been the same dang year you're talking about where we had I caught more freaking 5 to 6 pounders than I have any other year from a numbers standpoint. And I want to say it was the year you're talking about because it was very cold spring. And what I had noticed was I followed them from their wintering holes to their staging areas. And on the staging area, when it was still rather cold, when you thought they would have moved up already, all I was catching was 3-4 pounders. But then I moved up shallow and I wasn't catching many, but every single fish I caught was over 5 pounds.
Big.
So it's almost like the females moved up. Like what the cold snap kept the males back. The females are like, we're going. Like, we don't care. Like, we're getting rid of this crap. But what I noticed, though, too, is that year I found a lot of more beds deeper. So it's almost like they started, like they had the desire to spawn. Like they tried to spawn. Many of them did deep. I remember I won a tournament there catching largemouth off beds in 16 foot of water. Jeez. And yeah, which was crazy. Like I had the hunch of like, they look like they're acting like they're spawning. It would take like 3 different casts to finally catch this. Like they bite it, and then at the third cast, they finally eat it. I'm like, they're acting like they're spawning. I don't know why it popped in my head. And I came the day after the tournament and I put the AquaView down there and it's like beds everywhere.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
And I'm like, huh. And the water temp wasn't even 50 degrees yet. Yeah. And so I wish I could fully understand that because I think it's the coolest freaking thing in the world, how all of that creates a new equation every year when it comes to length of day, moon phase, to water temperature, all that. I probably should go get my biology degree, but I'm not intelligent enough to do so. Yeah. But it's so cool how it's different every single year. Well, last year they didn't spawn deep like that.
Yeah.
It's only those colder springs you talk about.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And you said something there that I found interesting because like I think Rudd has he has like a name for this where you like try to figure out what bass are doing and put it into human context. I don't know exactly.
Anthropomorphize.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that is the word. I'm not going to attempt to say it, but you did say something there where you said that when you went shallow, a lot of those fish, you would catch them, not as near as many, but they would be big ones. And I personally feel a lot of times in the pre-spawn that some of the first fish to move up into shallow water where you can target it with like a jig, flipping a jig or spinnerbait, chatterbait type deal, are the big ones, are the females. And then personally what I feel like is that the females get there first because they're fat, full of eggs. They're like, let's freaking go. Like, just like, your wife hasn't been pregnant yet, but my wife has, and she is ready to go, come give birth. Like that last month, she is like, I need this baby out. And I somewhat feel that that is how females act at times. They are moving up first, they are getting ready, and I feel like you do catch a lot of big ones, but I feel like then there is a flood of males. I feel like after the females get there, there is a flood of males to the point where the males know that they're about to eat, like they're about to not eat for a several long week period. So I feel like the females are still in shallow water, but then the males move up and they are super snappy, where you are catching mostly a lot of males, and then every now and then you'll pop a big female. But then the reverse happens, because like down in Florida or down in other places I've fished, everyone will tell you like, man, you know, I caught a bunch of 12 inches here in practice, but the females moved in. And I personally feel like the females were always there, but the males went from being there and snapping and eating to actually setting up on their beds, where then the females, you know, because the male has to coerce the female to its bed. And so the males finally, when they do that, that is when you start catching them, for example, bed fishing. But that's just my like theory, and I don't know if you agree with that or completely disagree, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I absolutely do agree with that. I feel like they're always there or within the area. And I noticed it. You brought up Florida. So there was a lake that I had found, some random Google Earth lake, when I was staying at my parents' house when they lived in Florida 2 years ago. And I went and fished it one day, and like you said, all I caught was males, maybe a couple 2-3 pounders, and kind of wrote it off. And a couple of days later, I went to go leave to head back to New York, and I'm like, I got 3 hours. Let's just go fish it again. It's on the way. And I caught a 6.5. I caught a 6 1/4. I caught a 7.5. And I think another one was close to 7. Like, I had a freaking bag. And I'm like, I fished the same freaking stretch. Like, what changed? And I think I believe your theory, man. I feel like it's just something changes in the dynamic when they're up there. Like, I don't think it's just they flip flop. One goes deep or one pushes off, one goes shallow. I don't think that's it. I think one just changes duties. Like, it's your job to look over the kids today. It's okay. It's my time to defend the bed. Like, it's yeah. I feel like there's a rotation there almost.
Yeah. Super interesting. Now we're getting slightly off topic, almost getting into the spawn, but really we're talking about leading up to it. But still, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier, and I think that this is probably a huge keyword, a buzz phrase that you hear a lot when it comes to pre-spawn, is staging areas. So really, like, I would love for you to define kind of what a staging area is, or maybe even some, like, what are some of the first places when it becomes pre-spawn that you are looking to fish on a lake? Like, what are you looking for?
So, it can really be dependent on the fishery you're at. You know, like, obviously highland reservoirs are going to act different than glacial lakes, and they're going to act different than river systems. For me, it can be something as simple as, I know that's a spawning flat. It's a little bay that has a bunch of cattails in the back. Like, obviously they're going to spawn right there, largemouth wise. It can be something as simple as a rock pile that is towards deep water access, towards the main mouth of that flat, or it could be a simple, a steeper drop to deep water access. It could be as simple as a brush pile that's right there. It just gives them something to hold on. That's not the wintering hole. That's not the spawning flat, where I can't say how many times it's been this one same rock pile every single year. I know if once they get there, I'm like, okay, this is the last stop before they spawn. Like, it's kind of like when you spend enough time on a fishery, you kind of start learning that thing. But it can be that. But then say you take a creek arm down on, like, let's talk about the TVA. You take a creek arm. The way I look at it is, if I know it's pre-spawn, I'm going to start at the mouth of the creek, and then basically your first either bend or your first kind of, like, say, a subtle point that comes out through that creek arm, that could be a staging area. So typically from there, I start at the creek mouth and just fish my way to it, and eventually you're going to start running into them. And that's kind of where they'll stage before they start spawning back in the pocket, and obviously the spawn gradually comes towards the mouth. But yeah. It could be so varied depending on what the fishery is. It just, if you look at a map and you look, okay, I know it's a spawning area. If you can just find some sort of contour or even a landmark like whether it's like I'm talking about like a subtle point that comes out, something that gives them that you think gives them an obstacle to then get to that spawning area, likely that's your staging area.
Mm.
That's at least the way I look at it to make it simple, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And that's kind of the way that I've always looked at it too. I remember listening to Paul Nick, you talked about him earlier, talk about kind of his triangle theory type deal where,
Yes.
you know, if you basically mark, you could do it either way really, but mark the wintering areas, mark the spawning area. And a lot of times you're going to find big fish kind of in the triangle that makes. But that's also kind of a lot of times where you will find those staging areas. And I think that a lot of times there are several staging areas leading up to the spawn. It's not like the fish go from winter to one staging area and then to the spawn. They might hit 2 or 3 different kind of areas where they almost rest or just at least maybe eat until they go up to spawn. And the best thing that I know that you've probably experienced too is that some of those staging areas get to be really good again in the immediate post spawn. And at times, those areas can be very hard to find, especially the really good ones that aren't super obvious. But usually I feel like, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but usually when you do find a good staging area, those are areas that bass will literally come back to every single year. Like it could be very specific spots that they come to every single year.
Yeah. I mean, bringing up that one specific rock pile I have, that is like, that's when I usually know is, okay, now this is the last stop they have to go before they hit the spawn. There is a kind of a chain of rock piles near it where I know, well, that's a little bit of a feeding ground. But what's cool is there is a certain point where last year and this year is really the only time besides the COVID year that I'll actually have like the time to really go study it again. But when COVID happened, I obviously had these areas, but I didn't fully really understand how it worked and kind of how these fish transition to get up to the spawn. Mm-hmm. We had one day that was pretty dang warm. We had no wind for like 3 days in a row and was like perfect pre-spawn. Some fish were spawning and I could literally, there was 15 foot of viz and I could see the rock pile from standing up, like on top of the water. And I got to see.
Wait, you're Jesus? You can stand on water?
Like, on the kayak, obviously, but I'm standing there and I see there's beds down there. And I see literally you can just watch. I sat there for probably like 45 minutes, dude. And I just watched fish move from one pile to the next pile, come in, leave. But then the same ones on the beds stayed there. So it literally was almost like you had a mix of pre-spawn, post-spawn, and bedding fish all in one spot. Wow. And you can find that like that. Those are the magical spots people talk about.
Yeah.
But like, obviously having fish spawning there too is kind of like a pretty unique deal. But to your point, you can find fish that immediate post-spawn where you might have post-spawn fish coming back and pre-spawn fish who still haven't moved up yet. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of have the best of both worlds where that's where you just like, you're wailing on them all day long if you can find those spots.
Yeah. Those are, I feel like, especially with, Bassmaster Major League Fishing, they do have so many tournaments and have had so many tournaments over the years that are in the pre-spawn phase. And it's always, oftentimes, a guy who finds kind of that place where fish are moving, it's a staging area where fish are moving before they go to spawn and coming back is such a big deal. I remember Buddy Gross went in down on Toho, and he would literally catch a pre-spawner and then he would catch a post-spawner, and you could tell the difference in those fish very easily. But he had just found one of those sweet staging areas, and it was a really cool deal. Now, with all that being said, and we're going to exclude swim baits because I know it's probably going to be on your list anyways, but when it comes to the pre-spawn, if you could pick 3 baits to kind of go with, 3 of like the top ones that you would say that you use, what would they be?
I'm going to go with the crankbait first. For us, we don't get to do too much crankbait fishing unless it's like super deep grass line type fishing in the summer. So that's where I kind of get my cranking in the north is the pre-spawn. But they also just eat it so freaking good, dude. And it's, but crankbait for sure. I mean, it can vary from whether it's a square bill to like a DT10 or DT12, whatever it is for the depth I'm fishing. So crankbait, you can't count out chatterbait. Chatterbait is just a freaking killer in the pre-spawn.
Mm.
I'm trying to give one that's like unique, not just your everyday list of baits. Okay, I'll tell you one.
It's got to be your
I
favorite.
love.
It's got to be your if you could only have 3, so it's okay if it's one.
Well, dude, because the pre-spawn for me, like I was saying earlier, with our fish, we're very fortunate up here, where we have some awesome fisheries where I kind of like bring my standard go-tos that I know are always going to get bit, but then I'll have like 3-4 rods of like, okay, how weird can I get? And it's going to see like what they'll eat. But I've caught a lot, dude. I've caught a lot of big ones on a scrounger in the spring, and not like using it like you would. You're talking about on the ledge. Like I'm just kind of slow rolling it on bottom with a big fluke style bait in the back.
Yeah. That is a good one. And probably one of those ones that when everybody is chatterbait fishing, it's like that, but just a little bit more subtle and probably can get more bites depending on the pressure. But that is a good one. And I think that you're right. When the scrounger phase like really kicked in is when guys were using them primarily deep, I feel like. There was Aaron Martin's had a couple of big tournaments where he was fishing them, a lot. But I feel like shallow water scrounger fishing is probably something you don't hear about a whole lot. And I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be shallow if you're fishing a staging area, but it might be 5, 6, 7 foot deep where it's not, ledge fishing.
Yeah. I mean, there was one of the places we fished that's what I consider a staging area. Andy, him and I were together, and he was fishing a crankbait, a deeper diving crankbait. He's throwing a heavier spinnerbait. We were getting some bites here and there, and I picked up that scrounger, and it was like 7 casts in a row.
Yeah.
And because it's just something else, I think it's also a little bit different too. But I mean, I think the spring is where you can go have some fun and really, like we were talking about earlier, gain some confidence in some different baits. But
yeah, you
can't go wrong with the standard jig, spinnerbait, chatterbait. Yeah.
Well, and you actually said something that, like, I would say is exactly like me. A lot of times in the pre-spawn, like the 3 lures you selected are all moving baits. They're ones that you're winding a lot. So I feel like that is something that is so nice about the pre-spawn is that oftentimes you can just go out there and cover a ton of water, throw crankbaits, spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, scroungers, big swim. Like you can just cover a ton of water and catch fish. But I do believe that there is a time to slow down in the pre-spawn. And I know that for me, that is one of the harder times that I struggle to recognize. So when would you say is kind of when do you slow down in the pre-spawn?
When they stop eating the moving stuff.
Simple. Love that.
That's my ADHD speaking. But I mean, dude, the way I look at it is, I mean, a football jig in the spring is a freaking killer. Shallow, like flipping a jig on laydowns, docks, things like that is a killer. In my mind, I'm going to throw that a lot, especially in competition. But if I'm fun fishing, that's going to be my cleanup, where it's like I look at it, say there's 10 fish on this staging area. I feel like 8 or 9 out of 10 is all going to eat that jig. But if I can get 5 on moving baits and then 3 on the jig, I'm like, that's perfect ratio for me.
Yeah.
Like I'll take those odds where it's just mixing it up. But again, that's completely my ADHD talking, where you can absolutely start with the jig and clean house. So I wouldn't not have it. I would always have a jig ready. It could be a Texas rig too. It doesn't have to be super over complicated. You could be Ty and throwing his Ned rig in Ohio. But I'll choose to never throw that ever.
I hate
it.
Hate it.
The jig dude, I don't think there's a bad time to throw the jig.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We should have a whole video on a jigs at some point because
jigs like this. It's the Zamboni of fishing, dude. It just cleans everything up.
It took me a minute to recognize where my brain was going when you said Zamboni. I'm not quite that far north, like hockey. I feel like hockey north, but Zamboni.
No, you got football and that's it.
Yeah, man. That's all. It's a high state football around here. That is all it is. Because the Browns suck, the Bengals suck. They always have. They always will. So, but I guess the New York isn't great as far as professional. Well, Buffalo.
You got the Bills, but like you don't have any championships up here besides the Bandits, which is indoor lacrosse. But for us, it's hockey. I mean, it's a hockey state.
Yeah.
So
Gosh. All right. Yeah, getting off topic a little bit, but
as always.
Yeah. So when it comes to the pre-spawn, I do want to know what would you think what do you think is one of the bigger mistakes anglers make during the pre-spawn?
I think not moving enough, not
I was hoping you
covering
would say
ground.
that.
Yeah, because I mean I've seen it before where like certain anglers will like they'll be on a fishery where they caught them good in one spot in the summer, and they try to then go in the spring and fish at that exact spot and hunker down there for hours on end and wonder why they're not catching as many fish. Where I feel like the pre-spawn is a great time to just literally like, I mean, you can as simply put in, it's the pre-spawn, water temps are in the 50s. You launch, start fishing at the launch on the bank, and just don't stop. That is a great way to approach pre-spawn, and you'll catch a lot of fish doing that.
Yeah.
I think you don't move enough.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like that is at times true for almost all the year round, but definitely in the pre-spawn, they are, like you said earlier, they are snappy, they are bitey, and somewhere on that lake, or lake or river or pond, I mean, they are probably like going to town somewhere. And so it's like you said, it's not really worth it to fish an area for too long without moving. Like you will find them and start catching them.
Yeah, and I'd say another thing too is like you find a stretch and you go down it and you catch them. It's a lot of people that just kind of abandon it after that. Go back down it, because especially when we're talking about reloading, like spring's a great time where you might have missed some fish, you might have spooked some fish, or quite simply they didn't see your bait, where you can go back down through and maybe not catch as many, but you'll still get more bites. So I see like people will go and fish a stretch at like 9 a.m. and then they're done with it for the day. They won't go back. Like, oh, we caught a bunch there, but like we probably caught all that was there. Now, chances are 2 hours later, all those fish are gone. There's a whole new wave of fish that are there.
True.
Well, I've done that for one day. I fished the same stretch for probably a good 5 hours. Just went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and just kept running into fish.
Yeah.
Especially when you have that, when they're on the move, that heavy transition phase, that's like a great time to be doing that.
Yeah. I mean, hey, if they're there and they're biting, you might as well stay. I mean, literally one of the biggest like rules that you hear in bass fishing all the time, like don't leave fish to find fish. And I feel like it's hard for anglers at times because we always think the grass is greener somewhere. Like I feel like it's in the pit of our stomach, like, or wherever, that it's like, they're probably biting over here. But if they're biting where you are, I think that it's so important to really capitalize on it in the time, especially if you're a tournament angler. I feel like this is one of the biggest lessons I've learned here recently, is that when you get to an area and they are biting, even if you caught them better, the day before in a different place, take full advantage of a group of fish that is biting, because there's a lot of times on the water where I have been around an area where fish are biting. I get maybe a limit and I'm like, all right, let's get to the juice. And then I get there and I'm not catching fish, or it's not going well. And I'm like, man, then I go back and then there's a guy sitting on that spot or whatever it may be. And it's like, man, if I had just sat there, I probably could have weeded through a lot of fish to get to some quality fish. And I feel like that is something, I talked about this in a recent video, but last year, I feel like me and my partner were able to do well and win quite a few tournaments. And that was one of the biggest things. When we got around fish that were biting, especially if we were to pop like one quality fish where we kind of knew they were in the area, we did not move a whole lot. And really in the pre-spawn, you see that more times than not. Cause like you said, there may be a whole new wave that is right behind the fish that you just caught. So I think that is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know those 2 points definitely kind of contradict each other, of like keep moving and then don't move. But I feel like they're situational based too, and where it's like, if you want to go find bites, move. Don't like hunker down if you're not getting bit. If you're not getting bit as often as you'd like to, or at all, move. But if you are getting bites, nothing. I'm not saying you shouldn't go move and go explore, but like if you're getting bites and your goal is to catch them, then don't leave. And then when they stop biting, then start moving again.
Yeah. And there's a huge mindset aspect to fishing that I think a lot of anglers don't, not a lot, but there's a lot that maybe don't pay attention to. And that's exactly what you just said, because those 2 points are pretty much perfectly contradicting, but you kind of have to think about them situationally. Like you said, if you are looking to get bit, it's probably best to just keep that trolling motor on, or feet moving in a kayak, although you all have a bunch of trolling motors these days or whatever they're called.
Yeah, we're a bunch of cheaters now.
Yeah, cheaters. You should be out there with oars, man. What are you talking about?
I know. I should be kicking
yeah.
in the back of it, swimming with the kayak.
Yeah. But then when you find them, hunker down. You might as well. Like if you found, and it could be one of those spots that literally pays off for years, where it's a pre-spawn staging area. And if they're sometimes those little bit sneaky areas, they're harder to find. But when you find them, man, there's spots on some of these lakes near me where like if they're there, they're the winning ones almost every time.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah, except they're biting there, dude. It's such a tough situation though, right? When you talked about earlier, like, oh wait, we got to go to the juice. If they're biting here, then they might be snapping at the juice. It's such a hard decision because that makes perfect logical sense. But at the end of the day, just take advantage of what's in front of you.
Yeah. No, that is the hardest thing in bass fishing. When to stay, when to go. It sounds so easy, and it is, to make a move, but like that's what separates a lot of these anglers out there. When to stay, when to move. It's simple as that, but it's so difficult to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, all right, man. Well, I think that kind of concludes most of the question I had. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you wanted to say about pre-spawn fishing?
If you have time off work, that's the time to take off work because that's some of the best fishing.
Yes.
I mean, people say the KVD season, that's where fishing is typically the easiest. So go have fun.
KVD season. That's true. And we don't want to be taking off in the middle of September, right? Go in April, go in May, and
yeah. If you're not a hunter and you're not taking off for your rutcation, take off for the pre-spawncation.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Perfect, man. Well, Bailey, it was awesome having you on. Full of juice, and I'm sure most of you guys have checked out the Serious Angler as well as his personal YouTube channel. If not, I will have them linked down below. Bailey, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate the invite, dude.